episode 152 of the I Rock Knits podcast. Today I have a really special guest to share with all of you, and that is my father, Don Schmitt, and he's going to be talking to me about our family history and genealogy. And so it's a very different podcast. There is no knitting in his section, but I found it fascinating. Dad has done a lot of historical research, and he and my mom, even many years ago, went back to the Ukraine and Germany and went over into part of Russia and found the town in which his family began their journey. He has so much knowledge, and it is so interesting how the family came to South Dakota, where I grew up. And I wanted this memory for my family to be recorded on video. And once we finished recording it, it was so special to me that I really wanted to just share it with all of you and have it out there for the family to see on YouTube. So I'm hoping that this is something that you will enjoy, getting a glimpse into a little bit of my life and my family. I have had so many friends on the podcast, and I've had my mom and my daughter, but I've never had my dad. So he's a really special man to me. He worked super hard as I was growing up. He was a pharmacist and owned his own drugstore, and he worked from 9 in the morning until 10 at night, Monday through Saturday, and 9 to 1 on Sunday. And he would come home at 5:30 for dinner, and boy, we kids had better be there if we wanted to see our dad. It was kind of a special remembrance for me to think of how hard he worked to support our family. And how hard it was to own a small business and to run like an entire little drugstore. Corner drugstores are not really a thing in the morning anymore. We did have a fountain, and we talk about that briefly, but you know, he had a jewelry counter for many years. He had cards and gifts, and an alcohol liquor license, and a post office was all in this drugstore. And so it's just amazing to me that he worked those kinds of hours, and now in his retirement has been able to spend some time reading, which is where I get my love of reading completely. So I'm going to share that with all of you today. I'm hoping that I can also garner some support from some of you for some test knitting. I'm going to be sharing some finished objects on the Patreon podcast. And if you haven't become a Patreon, will you please consider doing so? It's just as little as $2 a month. And I have a lot of extra content over there that no one is watching. I'm recording an entire extra episode, and very few people are watching it. So just as far as viewership goes, it is available right with this podcast that I do, Chatting with Friends, over on the Patreon group. And you can cancel at any time. So there's a $2, a $4, and a $10 membership. So I would really appreciate if you would go over and join us. I do have a knit night coming up on July 25th. So if you join before the 25th, you can join us for knit night. And then I just announced the new book discussion for August. So it's the July book pick is In 5 Years, which is one of my favorite books from 2021 by Rebecca Searle. And it's just a fantastic book. I'm trying to always choose shorter books so that you have a chance, if you're non-reader, to maybe kind of jump in with that. Several of us listen to them on audio, but we are choosing, quite a bit shorter books, nothing above, probably 7 hours of listening. And 2 of them have been even shorter than that, 4 hours and 5 hours. So we're really trying to keep those, and those discussions last about an hour, and you can just come listen. But I post all the recordings of those in the Patreon group too. So if you can't make knit night, if you can't make book club, you can watch them later. So if you can't make it in the evening, then you can just watch them later. So think about joining my Patreon group and supporting my creative endeavor that I was doing over here for 5 years. So the first test knit that I have going on is for the Chevy Hat. This is a hat named after my dog, Chevy. This is imitating his collar and his little dog tape. But if you don't know that and you're not a dog lover, then it's just a chevron hat with a little circle. I need people to knit sizes baby, child, that's 14.5 inches and 16.25 inches, adult large and adult extra large, and that's 21.75 inches and 23.75 inches. So if you have someone with a baby or a big head, I could really use a test knit on that. It's DK weight. I use Brooklyn Tweed yarn. It is their, what do they call them? Discovery skeins, so little mini skeins, and a solid color, but you can use any yarn you want, and the deadline isn't until mid to late August, so you do have time. So if you have time to knit a hat for me, that would be great. I do need test knitters, one in each of those categories at least, and I like to have two. And then the second thing I need is testers for my Stripe Dream sweater. I started over. After the last podcast, I showed everyone what it looked like. I had been really struggling with the vision and what I was going for. It isn't easy to see here, so I'm going to tip it forward. So what it is stripes with a little blip row in between. And you do 7 rows of color in the stripes, and then you switch over to 3 rows of color. So there are 5 colors. I used Leading Men Fiber Art. The yarn is barbapoled with a light and a dark color. So the blue has a light and a dark, and the pink has a light and a dark, and the maroon has a light and a dark. So it's a really interesting new yarn that they have coming out. It is DK weight, but you can use any yarn you choose, and I ran out. And they are sending me more. So the bottom of this sweater will be this maroon color, so the stripes do not continue all the way down. And then in that maroon will be a tiny little stripe, 1 row stripe of each of the colors that are used up here. It will come in short sleeved and long sleeved, and a cropped version and a long version. I will need testers for the 32-inch bust all the way up to a 70-inch bust. The largest bust sizes are the hardest to find. So if you are a larger busted gal or man with a larger chest circumference, I would love to have you join me. I did completely switch the pattern. I had to rewrite the entire pattern for 12 sizes because I went from a yoked sweater to a raglan. The yoke sweater in the stripes was just showing the increases, and I could not make them look nice. They just were showing so much. I tried a lifted, I tried an E, backwards loop, I tried all the things, and since they had to happen in the middle of those stripe rows, it just didn't lay nicely. The stripes didn't look consistent. I just kept going with it thinking, once I block it, it's going to be better. Well, I steamed it, I blocked it, and I still wasn't happy with those increases, so I ripped both sweaters out. So this is my literal 4th yoke of this sweater that I knit. I do have the bright one too, and I had to order more yarn for that. So you would need, in most sizes, you're going to need 2 colors, 2 skeins of your main color, and then a partial skein of the 4 contrast colors. So the pink, the blue, the gold, and the green in this are the contrast colors. I have full skeins from Leading Men Fiber Arts, but I am not coming close to using all of them. So I think you could get by with a half a skein of DK weight. So if you have leftovers or scraps, or you just want to scrappy this up, I think it would be really fun to just see a bunch of colors. You could do it in a gradient, if you have a gradient mini skein set in DK, or if you wanted to hold fingering double, if you have that. So I really desperately need some test knitters. You have 8 weeks to complete the sweater, at least. I'm going to be sending it out by the middle of this week, which will be about the 15th of July or so, and I'm hoping that I can get everybody to have them done by about September 15th. So you will have plenty of time to work on it. If you've never knit a sweater, you are welcome. I need testers who don't know how to read patterns well, so that they tell me if the pattern is confusing. So you do not need to be an experienced knitter. This is a basic top-down raglan. You're just changing colors and then putting those blip rows in. You are using, a kind of a standard crew neckline. It shouldn't be too difficult. We're just really trying to show off the Leading Men Fiber Arts yarn. If you decide you want to test knit for me and you do want to get this new yarn from Leading Men Fiber Arts, they're offering a significant discount to my testers, and you get to pick your colors. So you can go over to their website and purchase that, and they'll get it out to you right away. Just let me know if you're at all interested in what size you could make. I would really appreciate that. I'm gonna say goodbye, and we're gonna do my little Chatting with Dawn segment, and then I will be back to record the Patreon part of this podcast. And so hopefully you've decided that you'd like to join me over there on Patreon, and you'll be watching a second podcast. All right, bye. Hello, I am in Sioux Falls, South Dakota with my father, and I'm gonna do a little interview with him today about our family history. I am really interested in all of the knowledge he has about the genealogy of our family. He has gone for the last, 20 years probably, maybe even longer, doing genealogy and looking into our family history and where we come from. And I don't have those stories. Dad has written it. You've written it up in like long form.
Little autobiography.
Right,
yes.
Yeah, of where they came from and stuff. But this is my dad, Donald Revane Schmitt, Don, he goes by. And I grew up mostly here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He had a small town drugstore in Condi, South Dakota, the first 5 years of my life, because we moved here when I went into kindergarten. Then you bought the drugstore here, which we'll get into, but he grew up in northern South Dakota. Wouldn't you call it northern?
North Central.
North Central. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Was the area that he grew up in. So yeah, welcome, Dad. I'm so glad you're here. He's not so sure about this, but we're gonna do it. And I told him I'd do a lot of talking, and that'll be good.
She doesn't get this talking from me.
No.
From her mother, but not from me.
That's
I'll try
good.
to do the best I can.
You'll do fine.
Yeah.
You'll do fine. Plus, once we start talking about genealogy, you have a lot of knowledge, and it's pretty easy for you to talk about.
Yeah. Yes, it's been interesting. When I retired, I missed, that I had chances during my early years to do some of this stuff because I lived with my grandparents or went to high school, and that I could have got information from, but when you're young, you're too soon old and too late smart.
Oh, that's good. But they lived in town, and
yes,
so you lived with them during the school year because they lived in town. And
that's correct. Yep.
How far would you have been from the school?
Well, the high school was 23 miles.
Oh, okay.
Our farm was located. It's in McPherson County, north central South Dakota. And it was a grain farm, and my dad was a very good farmer, and he had cattle, pigs, chickens, and so we were kind of self-sustaining on the farm. But in this September and during the wintertime, then the high school at that time didn't have buses, so I stayed with my grandparents in the wintertime and went to school. And that's where I think we should start, because this was my grandparents on my mother's side. I've got a little more information on my dad's side, and to go back, they were what we are known groups of people called Germans from Russia. And some of you may have heard about that and how that came about, if you would like.
Yes.
Okay.
No, yeah. Tell us how the family came and what you know from that beginning, and then we'll get up to the,
in the 1700s, Catherine the Great was the Tsarina or something in Russia. She had, I was just checking a little bit earlier that she inherited, Russia was in bad financial shape, and she had all this land, and nobody was using it, so she offered free land to German people to come from Germany and settle on this land. There was
Wow. And she had the money. It was a female that had the money and the power.
She was the Tsar.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and so that's within the 1700s, and to get this, they were promised freedom of religion, freedom to keep their language. They weren't going to be drafted into the service.
Oh, okay.
But there's a little anecdote that we can bring into later. So a lot of people, when I researched, both my grandparents on my mother's side and my dad's side came from the Stuttgart area in Germany. And so they went to the Ukraine, which we now know is in bad,
bad situation.
But the area that my grandparents came from was in northwestern Ukraine, called now it's called Moldova. They renamed it. And
that I recognize that.
And so in 2006, there's a professor in North Dakota at the university, or North Dakota State University, that takes a group of people, Germans from Russia, that are interested to a tour to the Ukraine every year. And so we landed my wife and I were able to go. She was kind enough to go with me, because I was very interested in my history, because that's where both sides of my grandparents came from. And we landed in Odessa, and then we had a driver and a guide that took us up to Moldova, and we stayed with a widowed lady in the town called, which is kind of interesting, was called Bergdorf, because that's the district. My grade school on the farm was named Bergdorf, so a lot of the school districts that time, were named after common names.
Places in. Okay.
And I don't remember now what the Russian name is for Bergdorf, but they've renamed it since then.
Oh, okay.
It was
because I remember you guys coming home and telling me that you stayed with this woman.
Yeah, she told us that she had been to Siberia. She and her husband. Her husband died there, and then when Khrushchev gave him the freedom, she says, we had no money to go anywhere or no place to go,
Yeah.
So
sure.
And so we went back to the village of Bergdorf, and we stayed with this lady. It's like what we would call now a bed and breakfast.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, Airbnb.
Yeah. And it was just amazing, because our guide has been staying with her quite a few years, so he had a connection with her, and he said he called her and he says, we'll be there about midnight or so, and and she says, that's fine, and she determined, and so we got there at midnight, and she had made vegetable, or what we call borscht, which was the
cabbage soup.
Yeah, cabbage soup, and she had made soup, and
usually with beets, with red beets in it. I love borscht.
It's like a vegetable soup, what most people would call it, except without meat.
Yeah.
And of course, and a little sideline, she had homemade vodka, and she offered us some vodka, and the guide and the driver, and it got a little jovial after a while. But it was interesting because she lived in this house, and I think she got like 600 rubles as a subsidized to live there. She had a huge garden. The village, there were ducks and geese and chickens in free range. They just walked.
Yep.
And there were no streets.
It was rural, right?
No, it was a village.
Okay, but not near a city.
No.
Right.
No,
yeah.
We were.
Right.
We were. I don't know. Quite a ways from Odessa.
Okay.
And I can't remember how long we drove to get up there.
But you didn't get there till midnight, so
well,
would have been a while.
Yeah, we did some other, So
yeah.
And but it was very interesting to stay with her. She was so hospitable. I think she gave up her own bed, and my wife just commented the other day that when we went to bed, she came in and tucked us in, and I could, at that time, I tried to speak a little German with her yet.
Yes.
And she could understand me and I could understand what she's saying, and she was very, she enjoyed life, because she asked, "Does your wife speak English or speak German?" And I says, "No, she doesn't." He says, and then she had a daughter and a son were living with her at that time, and she says, "My daughter," she says, "maybe we should take them to the market and sell both of them." She said, that was how
because you speak German, you wouldn't. I know now you wouldn't say fluently, but you spoke German fluently. You grew up in a home that spoke German.
I didn't speak English till I started grade school, and I was confirmed in the Lutheran Church in German. And so that was when it was 13, 14. So German was spoken in our home basically till I was 18, 19 years old. My mother and dad could understand and did speak some English. They weren't comfortable speaking it, but that's where I grew up. And so it was interesting to go back and try to speak some of the words, and see if I could still be understood. And it was. Yeah. So.
And that was in 2006 that you were there.
In Ukraine, yes.
And because I remember you speaking German whenever the family gathering, like when Irma and Otto would come over, which is his sister, and Wilma and Harley, you often speak English, and you had German words for foods that we would have an English word for, but you would have like a German word. Like I grew up remembering words like Nipfla, which was like a potato dumpling or some type of a dumpling, and then Kuchen and things like that, where that was common for that to be served, or the potato sausages from up there like that. Anyway, there were common things that just seemed normal to me that I don't think everyone would have had in their household.
And even when my wife and I got married, when we go out to when we at that time, like Cora mentioned, we had a pharmacy in Condi, South Dakota, which was southeast of Aberdeen, and our farm was northwest of Aberdeen, which is north central South Dakota. And when we get out to speak to our farm, and we start speaking German or something, and my mother would say, "Speak English so Marge can understand it." She loved my wife, and my mother was a very petite, introverted lady, and my dad was just the opposite. He was an extrovert. When we'd go to town, and at that time, most of the commerce was done on the Saturday nights.
Yes.
And so we'd go to town to get groceries and things. Dad would always have a bunch of guys around him, and he would tell jokes and stuff. And Mother would be, it's hard to imagine, she'd be sitting in the grocery store patiently waiting till Dad was ready to go home. And but that was, I stayed on the farm till I went away to college, and so in each summer I would come home and help on the farm.
So you had 4 kids
Yeah.
in the family. Harley was the oldest.
Well,
and
actually, I was the youngest of 5. My oldest sister died in infancy.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, yeah.
I forgot that. What was her name? Do you know? I
don't. That's questionable, you know.
Yeah.
Because I've heard several different names, and I can't. You know, but anyway, she died in infancy,
and where would she have been in the birth order?
She was the first one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, how sad.
Yeah. When there's kind of a story behind that too. My parents farmed at that time. My grandparents still were farming real close where our farm ended up, and so Dad was farming with his father, and at that it was early. That was in the 1920s, and the story goes that my grandmother, which would be my dad's mother, was a stoic kind of how you want to say.
Strong-willed, German woman.
Yeah, her husband had already died, so she was, but later on, but when they were farming together, mother would have to go out and help in the fields, and then they'd come in for lunch, and grandmother would make her hoe the garden while the men rested, you know, and because that's I guess the way it was done.
Yeah.
So that's why one of the reasons they claim that my mother lost the first baby, because she was, you know, whatever the reason, whether she didn't have the prenatal care or whatever. But anyway, so that's.
So who Grandpa and Grandma came, your grandparents came.
Yeah.
And settled
in
what we would say was Long Lake, right?
Yeah, that's when I did research on that. There was they came from Russia, and they sailed out of Southampton, England, and I when we were in New York, we were at Ellis Island, and I found the ship they came across, and they came. Over on a ship in 1892, and they were. It took like 3 weeks, and Grandma Schmitt had 2 boys, and she was pregnant with the 3rd boy. So I always imagine, you know, can you imagine being on a ship with 2 teenage or younger than teenage boys, and being pregnant and being probably in the bottom hold, and being nauseated with hundreds of.
But also, they came from Russia and that's what we were talking about this morning. Like, how did they just know where to go to get to where they needed to go?
See, you know, now we have Waze, and we have GPS, and they have maps, and you know, all kinds of stuff. They had nothing except word of mouth. Previous people had gone. Traveled before him, and then the word came back. And there again, it was the word was, you know, like they got free land in Russia. Now free land was being given in the United States, and it was a free country, and you know. Yep. And so.
And they had left Germany. We're going to go back here, but they had left Germany because of some religious persecution to go to Russia, because they were promised not to be able to worship as they saw fit.
Exactly.
And then in Russia, they started getting persecuted.
Because another anecdote was they were freedom of being in the service, but as it turns out, my grandfather served 6 years in the Russian army, and the story goes, and I have pictures of him, that he played the flugelhorn in the Tsar's Russian army band, you know, for 6 years, you know. So, and a good friend, when my grandfather died, a good friend of his spoke a eulogy at his funeral, and he verified that he served with him in the army.
Oh my gosh.
So, but yeah, so they, they, when Catherine the Great offered them, but later on, then they started taking that away. They had to start speaking, at first they could speak German, but then they had to start teaching them in Russian, and they had to go to the service. And so then when free land came available in the United States, some of the relatives had come over, so they followed suit, And
so they probably knew people who
yes,
had come, or
right,
knew
yeah.
they had enough knowledge
Right.
about getting there. But even once she gets across the whole ocean with the children, then they're in New York and they have to get to South Dakota.
And they can't speak English, So word has it that they got on a train and traveled across the country to Yankton, South Dakota. And from Yankton, South Dakota, my grandfather had a half-brother that had come earlier, and he had settled in Minnow, South Dakota.
Okay.
And so, which is in central South Dakota. So they traveled from Yankton to Minnow. My grandmother stayed with the half-brother of my grandfather, while my grandfather went up to Eureka or McPherson County to find land. And the story goes that they were actually fairly well off. The story goes that Grandma had gold bullion or coins sewed in her underclothes, I guess like $1,500, and so Grandpa was able to buy. Somebody else wasn't going to make it in the farm, and so he was able to buy land and oxen and to start farming.
And they would have had money to get on the train,
Right, yes,
right? Like
yeah,
they would
yeah,
have had
yeah.
enough money to get tickets for passage
Right,
on
yes,
the train.
right, yes.
So they would have had,
Yeah.
and they farmed in Russia. They were
Yes,
farmers in Russia.
That's yeah. Speaking of that, even when we were in 2006, when we were in the Ukraine, when we stayed with this lady, they still did communal farming. There were no, I think we saw one tractor. They would ride a bike out to the fields, and we saw people hoeing the corn by hand still in 2006, and then at night they'd come back into the village, and so the farming was still, there were no farms as such. It was done from the village, out to the land. And
they knew that they were going toward farmland and
yes,
good
right,
like
yeah.
South Dakota, good fertile
Right,
farmland
yeah.
that would have been valuable
right.
to them.
And if I don't remember, there's a certain way, if you claimed 80 acres or so, you could have 40 acres, some people may really know more about that.
Yeah.
But they were able to settle on that land if they improved on it. And so that's how then when my dad and mother got married, she was a daughter of another pre-settler. They came over earlier than my grandparents on my dad's side. I don't know quite as much about that side. My father had settled on more land, and so he gave each one of his sons a small piece of land in order to establish their farm on. So Dad built a house not too far from the original homestead and started farming there.
So did Grandpa and Grandma Weiss? Schmitt. Okay. Did your Grandpa and Grandma?
Yeah.
Did they have 3 boys when she came? Were there 3 sons?
Two boys and one. She was pregnant with another. But then later there were several more born here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a larger family.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then Henry
Yes.
is your father,
Yes.
and he would have been one of their sons.
Right.
Do you know where he was in the birth order? Like, was he one of the ones that came on the
Yeah,
early, or was he born here?
He was born in 1895.
Okay, so when they got here.
Yeah.
Yep.
But he had two older brothers, John and Jacob. Jingleheimer Schmitt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But anyway, John and Jacob, and then there was Henry and Edward and Edwin, and then there were two daughters, Frederica and but so
there's a big family. But your dad,
right.
Henry. And then Henry married Bertha,
right.
And Bertha's family had come earlier than them, and so Henry and Bertha got a piece of property from Henry's dad,
right,
to farm, and probably 40 acres. I mean or whatever. I mean the plots were always kind of that 40 acre,
or 80,
180, 160. I mean that's kind of the
and really luckily, Dad's farm was built right next to a lake. Not Minnesota lake. People would call it a pond.
Marsh.
But it was from one tip to the other was about 2 miles. But it was narrow and not very deep. And but during the 30s, really saved my dad's farm because he could. Nothing grew, but there was water, so he grazed his cattle and next to the rushes next to the lake, because the only thing else, and he said they cut thistles and to feed to the cattle during the 30s, and so it was early farming was tough. But that's the area that I grew up. We milked cows before I went to a one-room country school where the teacher taught grades from probably not each
first through
eighth. Maybe some classes that year they didn't. So by the time I got through the 8th grade, listening to all the studies done the previous, the other students had done, I had it pretty easy because I had already knew a lot of the story,
Were your parents educated? Were Bertha and Henry educated? Did they get to go to school? There might not even have been a school, right?
They did go to school. I think, as it was told, my dad finished the 4th grade. I learned later on that my mother got to stay with a relative in Leola and continue her education. I'm not sure if she finished all 8 grades.
Right.
But Dad was, even through 4th grade, he was, and I think it was passed down through heritage because, I was good in math. A lot of the kids in the Schmitt are very good in math, and even through 4th grade, my dad was the treasurer for the church, treasurer for the school board, and it's just just amazing.
That he wouldn't have had the education, but he had the brains
math,
and the skill.
To do so that's.
So then Bertha and Henry start the farm, and then they have 4 children, and they have the girl that died, and then your oldest brother is Harley, and then
Irma was the oldest.
Oh, okay.
And then Wilma. In fact, Wilma just turned 98 the other day.
Yeah, because you went to her.
Yeah, we went to her birthday, and she's got early onset dementia, and was not a good. We visited her, and she'd always would always call me her little brother. But
she'd say, "Here comes my little brother." I know,
but her 98th birthday, she was not a good day for her. But then the other was Wilma. Harley passed away in December. He was a pastor in Minneapolis, or the northern part of Minneapolis, and then I was the youngest.
But you all went to school. The girls got to go to school too. It was important in your family, or no?
Irma, she regretted it her whole life.
Well, she was the oldest.
She was the oldest, and
They needed her to help.
Well, no, my mother's father said, girls don't need an education. You know, at that time it was, you know, become a wife and farmer's wife, and that's, but Wilma was strong-willed enough, so she says, I am going to high school. And but even though Irma didn't go to high, she was very good in math also.
Yes.
She worked in an office at in Aberdeen, and then she moved to Sioux Falls, and she worked at a Vera McKinnon in the insurance office, and she filled out all those forms, and so even at that, you know, she was self-educated. And then, like I said, my brother Harley went through high school, Wartburg College, and became a Lutheran pastor. After high school, I went also 1 year to Wartburg College, and then I transferred to South Dakota State University and finished my degree in pharmacy in 1956. But like I said, even though I had left the farm, each summer we'd go back, my brother and I would go back and help do the summer field work, and then in the fall we'd go back to school. So.
And Otto and Irma were my
sponsors.
Godparents.
Godparents.
And Irma, being the oldest, you were very close.
Oh.
She almost raised you.
Right.
Right.
She was like, I think 14 years older than I was. And so she and I had a special bond, even till the day she died.
Yeah.
But
very stereotypically German, Wilma and Irma and Otto. Very strong, opinionated, forceful people. Like, you know, I just think of Otto always as being kind of a crabby old man. He wasn't. No. But when I was little, I thought it, because he was always so, you know.
Yes, but at that time we lived in Condie, which is 20 miles from Aberdeen, and they lived in Aberdeen. So Sundays the drugstore was closed, so we'd go up to Aberdeen, and Otto, when you were a baby,
I know he loved me.
He'd lay on the floor and play with you for an hour. So he just
But it wasn't until I got older that I appreciated him again, because after we moved and I wasn't around him as much, he always seemed like such a gruff German guy, right? Yeah. And I just think that is
part of our heritage,
right? Yes, to be, you know, kind of that, to kind of have that and be that way. So, you grew up on the Long Lake farm, and when Bertha and Henry left the farm, the four kids got the farm. Kind of, right? Yep. You were inherited the farm from Bertha and Henry.
Right.
Because I remember we've talked about then how you kept the farm and people farmed it, but your family, the girls didn't farm it, and Harley was a minister and you were a pharmacist, so you didn't stay and farm it after. You went to college, which I just think also is amazing that your parents thought enough of. And living in like really rural South Dakota, and to say to our two boys who should stay on the farm and help us farm are going to go to college and do the thing that
they never dissuaded us from not going to college. And it's really something, you know, and the farm stayed. And in fact, each one of it was easier then to sell our shares to Harley. He was more interested in the farm because he has a son that loves to hunt, and there's a lake, and they used to go back home to do some hunting and stuff, which I was not interested in, and so he was interested in selling buying our shares. So in fact, it's in his will. I'm not sure where, but it's still in the Schmitt family. I think it's his older son probably is interested in it. So. And
so the farm place is still there,
right?
But not all the buildings.
No, the buildings got moved. It had an auction sale, and then nobody wanted to farm it, and so the house got sold, and that got moved to Eureka, and the barn got moved to North Dakota, and
because I'll have put a picture in of the farm place when it still did have the buildings and the farm buildings, and you can kind of see it. But you guys have gone back and visited the farm a number of times over the years, but it hasn't been that long since you guys went up. Maybe 5-10 years that
I've probably.
I don't remember the last time you and Mom went up to Condi and Aberdeen.
Well, yeah,
because no one's up there anymore.
And I know one of the times was because I had a high school reunion, and so we went back to there. Well, and then we were up not too long ago because some of my cousins in Aberdeen passed away, and so we had but I've often mentioned, when you're small, it's kind of the terrain and around the farm was kind of hilly, and we thought, and I grew up driving a tractor and doing a farm, and those hills seemed humongous, now I go back and I think, well, they're like ant hills. And
it's the plains, but it felt like giant rolling hills,
and your perspective changes.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure.
So that was the life in the northern plains. The winters were one of the reasons I went into pharmacy was the winters were tough, and you'd work all summer long, doing all kinds of menial work, which is necessary in a farm, picking rocks, fixing fence, cutting hay, stacking hay, with the
feeding animals,
manuring barn,
Yep.
And I thought, do I want to do that for the rest of my life, and work that hard? Well, then I became a pharmacist, and I spent more hours probably than I would have on the farm.
Yes, you did.
But
so you bought we can skip forward to that, but you bought let's do how you married Mom.
Okay.
How you married Mom.
Yeah.
How you met
Mom,
because you were doing your pharmacy training. Yes.
Doing pharmacy, you had to do an internship for a year, and so I was able to find an internship in Sioux Falls at Grange Avenue Drug, where my future wife was. She was going to high school, and she was a soda jerk, and
that's a slang term that some people that would never have heard. So explain what a soda fountain.
Okay, a soda fountain. What you had
sundries,
a malt machine, and ice cream, and
you made root beer floats and Coke floats
and cherry Cokes. And
lots of stuff with pumps that I remember. Pumps you'd put 2 pumps of syrup and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and she worked behind the soda fountain, and they called them soda jerks. And I was a pharmacist, and I remember my boss at that time said, "Boy, wait." She was on vacation when I started working. Wait till this girl comes, boy. He knew I was single, and so and there was another girl that was also a fountain girl, and the boss would never let me work the same shift as my future wife, Marge. I had to work because the other pharmacist that I was working with, he didn't get along with the other soda. So I had to work with the other girl, and Vern got to work with Marge. And I was living in...
And how old were you?
Well, I would have been...
22-ish?
No. Yeah, about 21, 22.
2-ish?
Yeah.
And Mom was in high school.
Yeah, right. She was a senior in high school. And I was staying with a bunch of fellows, and one of the fellows says, "If you don't ask her out, I will ask her out." So one Sunday afternoon, Marge's folks are from Worthington, Minnesota. They lived in Sioux Falls, but their family came from Worthington. So one Sunday afternoon, they were for the weekend they went to Worthington, and Marge and I both happened to work, and so I got up the nerve to see whether she would go to the movie. with me, and we went to the State Theater, and on an afternoon, and the Ten Commandments were playing. And recently they refurbished that State Theater, and they were playing a movie down there. So we went to see because it's really kind of pretty now.
Yeah, beautiful old theater.
It's an old theater. And Marge told the guy, my husband and I had our first date, in the State Theater. And he says, really, how long ago? And it was, at that time it was like 59 or 60,
Yeah.
And so that's...
But that's so funny because my husband, who is also more of an introvert, would have had a hard time asking me to go on a date. And I was very interested. But he asked me to go to a movie. Oh. And the movie that we went to on our first date was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. So mom and dad went to the Ten Commandments, but their daughter went to the whorehouse movie.
So, times have changed.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. So do you think that mom was, you didn't work the same shift, but do you think, I'll ask her, but do you think she was interested, like, before you asked her out? Was she...
I'm not sure about, but to go on with that same story, the drugstore, the Grange Avenue, the guy says, I can't afford, even though I think at that time I was getting $65 a week. He says, I can't afford you. He says, you have to go find some intern. But it was required that you get a whole year's internship to be able to take the state boards. So I couldn't miss any work, otherwise I'd miss a whole year. And so he said, I'll call. So he called another drugstore to see whether, he said, well, yeah, one of my guys at that time in the service, because that was still prevalent there. And he said, yeah, I can use them for a while. And while I was working there, this is, I don't know if you've heard this story or not, I hadn't been dating, too many, because, and I wasn't, I'd never been in love. I didn't know. And so, and she was quite a bit younger than I was.
Yes, she was, because mom has said she was surprised that Grandpa Ford, her dad, let her go on a date with someone as old as dad. Yeah. Not anymore we would probably think that if you're 18 and someone's 22, there's a bit of an age gap there. Mom might have been 17.
Yeah, probably 18. Anyway, so I hadn't called her for a while, and she was a senior in high school, and so she finally got the nerve to go to Dow Drug at that time and see. I need, with the idea, I need school supplies, but she really wanted to, and. So
she was interested.
Yeah, so she was interested, yes.
But it's surprising me because she's more outgoing like me, and that, I would have, thought that wouldn't have taken too much nerve on her point to go over and say, I want to see Don.
But about 17 or 18 years old.
Yeah. And he's older and he's done with.
Yeah, and you're insecure too, because we hadn't been dating that long, and so.
And what did you drive in those days?
Well, with my first paycheck, one of my first paychecks at Grange Avenue Drug, I bought a '56 Chevy, because I had a '48 Chevy and Marge had like a '42 Chevy that she wheeled around in, and but then I got my internship, took my state boards, and then at that time you were still eligible to be drafted to the Army, and so I went after the state boards. I didn't want to get a job because I didn't know if it was going to be drafted. So I went back to the pharmacy or to the farm, and Walgreens from Sioux Falls called and asked if I was interested in working. And I says, yeah, but I'm still probably getting the, oh, that's okay, we need somebody. So I left the farm and went to work at Walgreens,
And then Mom started nursing.
Yes,
Nurses training.
Yeah, when she got to high school, her goal was to become a nurse, and so she went to Sioux Valley School of Nursing. So and I worked, and then when things got tough at Walgreens, they said, Don, you're going to have to find a different job. And so I looked, and I was always interested in buying my own store. And so a fellow that had 2 stores, one in Marion, South Dakota, and his dad owned the pharmacy in Condé, and he had a stroke. And so that became available. And so I looked into that, and so
and it was close to where you grew up,
right?
Really,
yeah,
I mean, it was close to where you grew up.
A small town is something that I could probably work, and we had a lot at Fruitra. It was a good thing we bought the store in Condé, because if we'd have bought a bigger store, we'd have probably got bankrupt, because they taught us how to become a pharmacist. They didn't teach us how to become a businessman, and so I learned on the fly.
Well, and just the fact that I think about this, which is why I wanted this part of the story, is that you came from a farm,
right?
And you went to pharmacy school, but then you decided to buy a whole store, right, like with all the things that come, not just a pharmacy, but you had a fountain.
Yes.
There was a whole thing where you were buying products like that and filling your store.
We had a jewelry department, and we had cosmetics, and I had to become a buyer, and but I bought that a couple of years or a year or so before we were married. So I lived in Condé while Marge finished nurses training, and then in '60 we got married, and then she moved to Condé with me, and we.
And then I was born in '61.
Yeah.
But she was
luckily.
She was a nurse in Condé.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. We were the healthcare unit in Condé. She did home nursing.
So we had a little interruption, but so you had the pharmacy in Condé, and then what kind of precipitated the fact that you guys moved to Sioux Falls? You sold it. There was a guy there that wanted to buy it, and
not really, because in a small, when we first got to Condé, there was a doctor that would visit Condé, 2 or 3 days a week, and Marge did some office nursing, and she also. If people had get injections or something,
she would do shots.
She would go shots.
She did all the school shots too, I think, for kids, that went to school and that kind of thing.
And so then all of a sudden, a drugstore in Sioux Falls became available, actually from the fellow that my first intern and where Marge had worked.
Okay.
He had 2 drugstores, and he wanted to get rid of the one, and so we decided to the doctors that used to visit there didn't quit coming, so it was, we made a living, but in fact, we heard later on, when Marge's folks came, because Marge's dad was in business, so he knew he came up to Condé to visit, and he told us later, he said, if those 2 kids make it, it'll be a miracle, And but
I don't have a lot of memories of Condé, a few, and I did go back, years later, but now I haven't been back in quite a while. But my younger brother Mark was also born there, I think he was born in Redfield, but you guys had a 2-story old home,
right?
And you were closer to your family up there,
up to Aberdeen,
and Mom was accepted by your family, and they loved her, and she loved them. But then moving to Sioux Falls moved her closer to her family, her parents, and her brother and sister.
And it was more probable that we could make a living in Sioux Falls rather than keeping the store.
Because at the time, what would the the population of Kandy have been? Right.
300-400 maybe.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
and that
we're
was-
small town, right? Like
yeah. But
But
huge.
farming,
But
like lots of people in the. You would have been the hub for.
Yes, wonderful people, a huge farming community, and so large part of my business was I taught myself veterinary medicines, and so I sold a lot. Rather than prescriptions, I was selling. And I grew up on the farm, so I knew about pigs and cattle and some of their diseases, and which wasn't taught I could have learned about it at college, but I didn't.
Right.
So it seemed really a better idea to if we were going to make the change.
And then Otto and Irma were in Aberdeen. And Wilma was in Aberdeen, and Harley would have been wherever he was ministering. But Irma and Otto eventually moved to Sioux Falls.
Right, and then my parents sold their farm, and moved to Aberdeen, and about the same time we left Kandy and moved to Sioux Falls, So they says we moved closer to you, and you moved away from So, but then later on, my dad ended up in a nursing home. Well, both my parents ended up in nursing homes in Sioux Falls, and that's another story. But
let's look at this because this came up on my phone, which is partly a little bit about why this whole thing came to be. That I really wanted to talk to Dad because I have heard these stories in snippets. Not just. Although I will say Jeff did the audio recording of this many years ago, and so we all at the time had a cassette tape, and it's on record at
the Library of Congress in Washington D.C.
He did an audio recording as part of a program.
Right, they came around to different towns and did these kind of histories to restore his,
So I had heard that, right? Like I had listened to that, and I probably somewhere with all of our old, it was prior to CDs, so it would have been would have been cassettes. This kind of story of where you came from, and that you went to Russia. But then this came up on my phone because I have the Time Hop app that brings up things that happened, and it's a picture of Dad's DNA.
I decided, when I did my genealogy, I thought it'd be interesting to do my DNA, and which was a surprise. When you say Germans from Russia, you think German heritage.
Right. Yep.
Well, as it turns out, that I am like 39% Scandinavian, East European. The biggest surprise came that I have some Jewish heritage.
Yeah.
And which in a way is not too surprising because I think in Germany, as you know,
there were a lot of Jews.
You're right.
But Ashkenazi's Jewish, 2.2%, and then Sephardic Jewish, 4.2% from the Middle East, is way toward the bottom there. But
then I have Asian heritage, East European from the Balkan. But Scandinavian, British, and Corey and I were talking earlier how I have no proof of this, but Lutheran pastor in Eureka did some historical
research,
and he wrote that the German people were Schwaben. When they travel from
gypsies,
I think in my mind is they followed their cattle or their livestock, from being that Scandinavian, which would be close to the British Isles, that way back on history probably, they were following their cattle
nomadic.
Nomadic. Yeah.
It took us this long.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Corey, what's the word?
Yeah.
They would have been nomadic with their
Schwab, nomadic people.
Yes.
And so they were following their animals to better pastures, probably, which southern Germany was really noted for, like the Black Forest there.
Yep,
It's
yep,
really,
yep.
And so I can see where some of and that goes prior to the 1700s, probably 16, 15, 1400s, during the time that they traveled from Scandinavia down to the German, and then from Germany to the Ukraine, and then the Ukraine to America. But it was really eye-opening.
Yeah. And I think anyone, I mean, I haven't had my DNA done, but I know mom's mostly Scandinavian, so mine would come out with some of this too. But I think when people have this done, they realize just what a mishmash of everything they are, right? Yeah. We all are such a melting pot. That's why people came to the U.S., right? And but looking at this, I would have said that if Dad had lived in Germany during World War II and been unbeknownst to him that he was Jewish, he would have been on the side of the German, side, but should have been wearing a yellow star. Not sure, but but no one would have known, right? And that's the thing that we were talking about, is like, when people don't know what they are, it's easier to hate what they aren't. And I just found it so interesting that we have all of this, Asia, Africa, Jewish, in our family history, which is wonderful and amazing, I think.
Yeah. So like I say, it was really revealing, and I'm glad I did it, because it made me more aware how small the world really is. At that time it was, in the 1800s or late 1800s, when my grandparents came, when you spend 3 weeks on the ships, to get from, now you can get from, we flew from Detroit to London, in a couple of
few hours,
because we took a trip to Europe back in 2001. In fact, that's a story I'd like to mention.
Because you guys went to...
we traveled Europe for 17 days, and we were at the Battle of Belgium, at the Battle of the Bulge, when the 9/11, when the tower went down in New York. So we were on a tour, and our guide came and says, "Don't be alarmed. We're okay." But somebody at that time, they thought, attacked New York City, because the 3 places got bombed, or airports, and but we were, and so all the telephones, we couldn't contact our family at home that we were okay. Where were we?
And your daughter and her husband were packing to move to Virginia that week before. And so my friend down the street was moving to New York. Kathy was moving to New York City with her husband, and we were moving a week later. So our stuff was scheduled to come on September 20th or 21st to move to Virginia. And we were also moving toward this terror that was it was so up in the air. Nobody knew, but we didn't know where you guys were or what was going on.
Get in contact with you.
And nothing was happening in Europe, so we were pretty sure. But the planes, we didn't want to get on a plane to go to Virginia, and the planes were grounded. And so the getting home could have become a bigger issue.
We didn't fly out of. We traveled out of. We traveled Europe for 17 days, and then we flew out of Paris, France. But a week later, so by that time it had settled down, and we came home without any problem. But it was, but really, there again, the world is so small that the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, was so one of the best reports, that kept us up to date, and much more so than probably if we'd have been here. And so and our guide was just amazing, because he kept us grounded, and kept us aware of what was going, because we had no, we didn't have the equipment.
You wouldn't have had cell phones.
Yeah.
No.
So the equipment where the communication wasn't as good then, because you had to get it from the hotel. Even that time, you had a long distance.
Call.
It was, and so that was.
But then you also took another big trip.
Yes, and fortunately, I will say, we were so. When I retired from active farm, then from Hilltop Drug, I became a managing pharmacist at Kmart from 80 to 99, or till 99, which when I retired. But then I worked part-time at a mail order pharmacy here in Sioux Falls, and which allowed us to travel. And so in 2010, we always wanted to go to the Holy Land or Israel, and so that we were able to do that, and it opened our eyes to really the history of the Bible. And some of you have probably been there. When you read about Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and the astounding part to Jerusalem, but Bethlehem. In order to get into Bethlehem, you had to go through a checkpoint, and armed guards came on the bus and checked our passports. Because Bethlehem is Palestinian, and not, and then when we left, it's the same way again. You had to go through a checkpoint, which was, when you're not, we're historically deficient, really,
Right. We just don't have the centuries of history that they have there. But we also haven't been involved in the conflicts that are constantly going on in that part of the country.
And, because there thousands of years, the Palestinians and Israelites have been fighting, and that's still going on. And so, but that was, we got to see all the historical places and that are mentioned in the Bible, and we couldn't do it now anymore because both my wife and I are getting up in years, and you do a lot of walking there, and up stone steps, and but to see the Sea of Galilee and a lot of the places, and we hear a lot now about Tel Aviv. That surprised me too. Tel Aviv is kind of like a New York City of Israel. It's pretty.
But that brings us right back when he's got his little note here that he went in 2010 to the fact that you have ancestry in the Middle East, in some of those areas that you visited because you had an interest in the biblical history. But what you learned also about was the history of the land there, right? Really the history of the land, and continues to go on to this day, where we have these conflicts that are hard to.
And some of you know about the Green Wall, and they had to go through the green, or farming on one side or to the other. And
when you were in Germany, when you went to Germany,
you had an option to go to one of the stalags. And our guide says, I'll take you there, but I would recommend that you don't go, because it's not.
It's so horrific.
So horrific. And so the majority ruled, and we bypassed, those concentration camps.
Yeah.
And we went from Odessa, and we flew out of Germany to come, and there was. I went to the library in Stuttgart to try to find, because my grandparents on my dad's side lived southeast of Stuttgart, and I found out later my grandparents on my mother's side lived on northwest of Stuttgart. I'm sure they didn't know each other,
Right.
but it's centrally located there. So I went to the library to see whether I could find some of the history, but I didn't have the time or the money to hire an investigator to reduce that, and I couldn't read the history
Enough
well
of it,
enough
yeah.
in German to really. I wish,
Right.
I
I do remember one of the stories coming home that you and Mom were on a bus, and you would go into places and people on the bus would say, Don, help us order.
Yeah.
Don, help us. Can you and you have a different dialect than some from your German than some of the places you were, but you were like, oh, okay, I can try. But it was one of the first times that people really appreciated your German.
Yeah.
And like now, I think when people speak a second language, we're very appreciative of people who've taken the time to learn a second language. And I took a couple of years of German in high school, but I certainly cannot speak any of it. But there, everybody wanted Don's help to understand the things.
Yeah. What's this on the menu? And well, that's this. That's what this.
Yeah. And I remember Mom saying, your dad was really popular on this trip because he could speak some of it, even though it's just like anywhere, you can go to Spain and there is a southern Spain language and a northern Spain language, and you could get by, but they're not the same. And then you guys would have had really South Dakota German, the way that they spoke, and then the things that influenced that as they traveled.
And something else that I just came to my mind that you might be interested living in Minneapolis. We went to Budapest, and you know that those are two cities. One is Buda and one is Pest, just like Minneapolis, St. Paul. Which I never knew of.
Yeah.
Budapest, but
didn't know that either.
So,
didn't know that either.
So traveling is. We were so blessed. Like I say, when I retired, to have that part-time job, that we were able to travel and see parts of the world. There's still a lot more that out there that other people have seen, and it's just interesting. So, as another milestone in my birthdays come up, I'm blessed to because both my sister and my brother started losing some of their memories. And I told some of the kids, I says, if you want to know anything, you better start asking, because I'm the only one left.
Yep. And you're going to be 90 in September.
I'll be 90 in September. Yes.
Yep. And so we're going to have a party, but it was another time when I was like, I got to get on this. Like, if I'm going to ask him, because you always feel like, there's time. There's time. Yeah. And there is, but I did really want to record and kind of have you talk with me about some of those stories that I had.
That I'm still, there's lapses and, that years go by and in my memory that I don't remember the exact days, but
but I have that, and I'm 63.
Yeah, but
right, like you're like, when was that?
It's just. I'm blessed to be able to still share, and hopefully, some of the other kids through this will be able to
see it,
hear it, and,
for sure.
And when we just, to me, one of the biggest things was the night. We were for a small farm boy from northern South Dakota to stand under the Eiffel Tower on a Saturday night was just beyond my living it. Even when I grew up from northern South Dakota to Sioux Falls was forever.
Right. Right.
To go from our farm to Aberdeen was a day trip.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and it really was maybe, how far would it take you today to go from the farm to Aberdeen? Is it like 30?
45 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
When growing up, we would go to Worthington, we would go to the lake, and to me, in the back seat of the car, that felt like the longest
60 miles.
hour of my life.
Yeah.
Like that, I hated the drive to Worthington. Now I drive home to Sioux Falls, and it, we do it, and it's a 4-hour drive. But when you're younger, those time and size.
Growing up on the farm, Sunday afternoons was a day of rest. Our folks would rest, and we'd, what are we going to do all afternoon? Now we can hardly wait for an afternoon. We can take a nap.
Exactly. That's the truth. So you currently have 3 children.
Right.
Me as the oldest,
Right.
my brother Mark, and then my brother Jeff. And Mark and Jeff both live here in Sioux Falls.
Right.
And Mark has 3 children,
Right.
and Jeff has 4 children,
Right.
and then their children have married.
Right.
So you have 9 grandchildren and
3
great grandchildren,
and 1 more due in October.
Yes. So it's
And interesting. Just the other day, my wife and I were having devotions, and but we heard about the mustard seed. How the bush, and I says, honey, you are that mustard seed. I says, from you sprang 3 children. You have spread out Minneapolis, here, and Sioux Falls, western Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
There's 1 grandson in Brookings. 1 will be going to Arkansas, to med school.
Kylie's in the Twin Cities.
Kylie's in the Twin Cities, and she's doing her service with teaching at church and stuff. The mustard seed has growing into a big bush, and and sheltering whoever wants. And it just came to my mind that from a mustard seed
comes this big family.
Comes.
As I was taking pictures this morning of some of the family pictures in the house, because when I come home here, Mom has the pictures that we've taken through the years, and the one with all of your grandchildren, which I will put in here. And one, it's a couple of years old, because we haven't had all the grandchildren together, because Andrew also lives in the Twin Cities, so he's not here when we come home. And and then we still have the young ones who are still in high school here, the grandchildren. But there are 9 grandchildren, and then these now great grandchildren, as these grandchildren have babies.
Yes, and each one is a revelation in its own right. They're all so different.
Yes.
That it's just amazing.
You guys have loved being grandparents. And you really love these great grandbabies that live right over here, because that brings so much, little ones. These are little ones that bring so much new energy.
One's gonna 10, and the other one's 4 or 5 years, and then the little baby.
He was born last September. So we're continuing on this, more family.
And to see our kids raise their kids, and mostly raised, and to see the things that we tried to teach them, and they're teaching their kids, and now with our grandchildren are teaching their kids,
I think to this day, the fact that Mark and Jeff and I all went to college, and we never talked about it. We were never sat down and said, you will go or you may not go. But Bertha and Henry sent their boys, and then you and Mom sent the 3 of us, and then the grandchildren, have mostly all gone to other schooling beyond high school, and and that it just carried through. It wasn't really about pronouncements or you will or you won't or whatever, but it has really carried through.
And as you growing up in this block, you know,
Yeah.
I think we're the only family where
We're
all
all
three
three-
of our kids went on to college.
Yeah, because
Yeah, 'cause
I
we're-
grew up in a middle income, neighborhood, and I still know there are still neighbors here that have lived here, the 50 some years that you guys have been here, and and many of those kids did not go on to school.
No.
It wasn't. We didn't live in an affluent place where that was the expectation.
No.
But then, what is also quite strange is that Mark and Jeff and I all went to college in athletics.
Yes.
Right? Like my brothers were both swimmers and they both swam in college, and I did gymnastics in college. And that is rare too, because you and Mom were not athletes in that way, right? Like you went into medical stuff, but the three of us were involved in athletics, and lots of kids are.
Yeah.
Many kids are, and they never pursue it past junior high or past high school, and then we all three pursued it past.
But
Right, because that is also a story that there were all these small drugstores all the way around town. So there was Assam and Dow and Hilltop and Park Drug,
and Bel Air and West,
so many. And all of these pharmacists all had little corner stores. There wasn't Walmart, Kmart, Target. Those hadn't come to town yet. And a lot of them had fountains. Not as many as, but we had a fountain for many years before you finally took it out. But all three of us kids worked in the drugstore from the time we could see over the cash register. And Mom too. But you definitely had employees. But then years later, when you went back to work for Tel Drug, and they was the mail order kind of out. You walked out there, and all the old retirement, the guys who had retired, the pharmacists, were all there at Tel Drug. So you guys would take your breaks together, and so you had known each other because you went on buying trips, oftentimes to buy product for the stores. You would go on these trips to buy the gifts for the gift department, and
if you were out of a drug, you'd call the neighborhood pharmacist, can I buy that? And they would share so that you could fill a prescription. So you wouldn't send the customer over to the,
other store.
So
you would,
and they would, it's a unique.
It's a different perspective than people today would have.
Right.
Because then eventually almost all of the local small went away, and then those pharmacists went to work for like the Kmart, the Walmart, the Target, or whatever came, the bigger places that came to town.
The story, I grew with a group of pharmacists, retired pharmacists now, and we were talking, our medical facilities in Sioux Falls are second to none. We have Avera and Sanford, and they're putting up new buildings all the time. And so we were discussing that thing. They were saying, if they're nonprofit organizations, how can they keep putting up those buildings? I says, I used to have a drugstore like that. It wasn't supposed to be nonprofit, but it ended up that way. and when as the little drugstores went, now the bigger store like Kmart's gone, Shopko's gone, Osco's gone. They went by the way. All taken up by
the big, and the mail order. And some of the mail order stuff that they buy in bulk and they buy more. They can buy more so they can sell for cheaper.
With our prescription, when you've on Medicare or whatever, they mandate that you mail away for your, even though I don't like it. Because that was my anathema. At that time, these mail order pharmacies, or even or even a Walmart, or was In fact, Ross and I just went to Walmart, and I think that's the first time I've been in that store in the 15-20 years.
And you were desperate to try to find a dehumidifier.
And that's one of our neighborhood stores, and I don't go there anymore because that was a bad competition for Kmart. Anyway, so
they've had so much rain in South Dakota, so much rain, and the neighbors are running hoses out their windows. The basements are full of water, and so you guys were looking for a dehumidifier this morning, and so we're just trying to find to help clear kind of the air. You've had 8.56 inches in the last week. And like 5 in the last 2 days. Everything's flooded.
Yeah.
Us driving down from Sioux Falls, we got rerouted and took a different way. The farmland is just completely flooded. They've just had so much rain.
That's more rain than we've gotten maybe in 2 years previously. A couple of years ago, we live in the hilltop area in Sioux Falls, and so we had at Icy Walton League, we had a gathering of hilltoppers, and we were having lunch, and pretty soon some girls came over, and they said, Don, here's a quarter. We stole candy at your store, and thank you, but then the funny or ironic part of it was, I have a real good friend that's a retired pastor, and he has a friend that's a pastor. So when he was out having coffee with his friend, and I came over and we were visiting a little bit, and Woody was telling this story about these girls stealing candy at my store, and this other pastor says, Don, he says, I stole candy at your store too, and I thought.
And you're wondering why you were a nonprofit.
Yeah. So I helped the community.
Well, we will leave it at that. A little story that we laughed at, and this was, thank you. I know that it wasn't what you really wanted to do, but I'm so glad you did. It was fun,
yes,
and we really got to talk about a lot of things, and I'm so happy that I can share that I have this information and this knowledge for my daughter and for her children someday. And so that's really special.
So like I mentioned earlier, it's just blessed when you have which I consider I've had a good life, had a full life. We've experienced a lot, ups and downs, like everybody does, more ups than downs. We were blessed with wonderful children, wonderful grandchildren. They're all successful, but
even more so, an amazing wife.
Yeah,
the love story that you and my mother have. We're gonna get choked up.
Yeah.
But the love story that you and my mom have is so apparent.
Yes.
In the world. You two have loved each other so much. There is just a bond and a connection.
Yeah. She held together. I worked. She early on she worked, but then when you kids were younger, I was working 70 hours a week, and evenings and weekends.
Yep.
We live a block from Kmart, and I lots of days I worked 12-hour shifts.
Yep.
I'd go in the morning, not get home till 10 o'clock at night. Marge would fix supper. And they would take turns. One of the kids would have to walk down supper to Dad. At the farmer's.
And when you had Hilltop at 5:30, you would run home for half an hour, and we better all be sitting at the table if we wanted to see you. And Mom would had taken us and done all of our stuff because Dad was going back into work. And today, I think now, if I had to work from 9 in the morning till 10 at night, 6 days a week, and on Sunday, there'd just be no way. And you did it for all those years. But you wouldn't have done it without the support of Mom.
No. When you talk about a helpmate, that's in capital letters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely a love story.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I get any more choked up,
right,
we're gonna say goodbye. We're gonna go have a little 5 o'clock tippler or something before we go out for Mom and Dad's wedding anniversary. So that's one of the reasons that we came down, because Mom and Dad will have been married 64 years on Tuesday.
Yes.
And so we're going to go out to dinner tonight, kind of special, take them out and kind of celebrate that because it's super nice.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Patreon subscribers. Thank you for being here. I am so thankful for each and every one of you. I go through and look through the names, but thank you so much for being here. I did do a big test call at the beginning of the regular podcast. If you have any desire whatsoever to test for me, I greatly appreciate that. What am I wearing? I am wearing my Misurina This is a sweater that I absolutely loved knitting. It has lace, it has cables, and it has color work. I knit it using Farmer's Daughter. It is called Reminisce, and it is a sport weight yarn, and it's super elastic. It's got so much give to it. It makes it super comfortable to wear. And then this is Spincycle yarn, and I used the Dream State. This colorway is called Slow Burn. I wanted these to look like flowers, and so I used the lightest color at the top and then gradiated down into the dark green, and it almost goes into black. So I did make the cropped short sleeve version, but I would really like to make another one in a longer version for fall and winter. The yoke is so much fun to knit, and I love the Farmer's Daughter yarn. It was a bit of a expense to purchase it. It isn't the cheapest yarn, but working with it was amazing. My friend Mary Yazvek, who's been on the podcast, is knitting hers right now. She's using the same yarn with Spincycle. She's using the coral as her main color, and it's just beautiful. And she agrees that the yarn is just so fun to work with. So that's what I'm wearing today. I am going to announce the next knit night. But the knit night that we have coming up for my Patreon subscribers is on July 25th. So that's next, well, if you're watching this, it's a week from Thursday. July 25th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. But then I chose the August date, so some of you could get it on your calendars, and that's going to be August 28th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So that seems to be a time that's working for everybody. We knit together for about 90 minutes. We share what we're working on. People are working on their Shetland Wool Week hats for the knit along. So I encourage you to come over and join us there. And then the next book club book has been chosen. So we did have our discussion, and I recorded that. So that's up in the Patreon group for you all to watch if you are interested in watching. The book that we discussed was Infinite Country. Next month, we are just finally going to discuss one of my favorite books, which is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. I loved this book. It does have a trigger warning around cancer. So if you have someone who is going through a significant cancer journey, you may want to opt out. But I finished that book, and the first thing I wanted to do was talk to people about it, and no one had read it. And so I talked about it on the podcast. A bunch of people read it, but then I never got to talk to those people. So we are reading it in August. We're discussing it on August 15th at 7 p.m. I think it's 7 p.m. And the book is In 5 Years. It's not too long. It's about a 7-hour audiobook, and I always listen on 1.5 times speed because people narrate slowly, and so you can get it done quicker than that. But it is a smaller book. It doesn't take too long to read it. So if you're even a non-reader, this has such an interesting surprise. This woman goes to sleep and wakes up in 5 years and sees what her life is going to become, and then you're not really certain for a lot of the book what's going on. Like, is she actually in the future or in the past? Is she telling a story? There's such a surprise ending. I just found it so fascinating, an interesting premise. So think about joining us for book club on August 15th. Okay, I did show this at the beginning of the other podcast, but I did finish my second Chevy hat. This one is the lighter colored one. I used a cream and then 3 skeins of Brooklyn tweed. This is American made, American dyed, American spun wool, which I just love. It was actually, the wool comes from Montana and South Dakota, which I, love. That's my home state. So I feel like I'm supporting that. And it does have a 4-square top. So I am looking for testers for this, but I did get it finished. It's the second sample. I showed the last sample in the mint colorway last time. Then I finished 2 other little hats. I had a 1-year-old birthday party yesterday for my great nephew. And this is the first boy born in my husband's family. So it was mostly girls. So his brother had 2 daughters and we had a daughter. I had seen him in the fall and then hadn't seen him. They live north of the city, and so we drove up for this birthday party yesterday, and so I made a couple of little hats. So I'm going to put pictures in here. I made a little football hat. His birthday party was sports themed, and we all had to wear a sports jersey, and all the kids came in their sporting stuff or their t-shirts from their teams or whatever. And then it was it was his rookie year, and they had a little t-shirt jersey made for him that said rookie, and then on the back it said his name, Brooks. It was so cute. And then it had rookie mom and rookie dad t-shirts. It was a really cute theme. They had all kinds of balls there for all the kids to play with and throw around. They did water balloons and a little swimming pool, even though it started to pour at about 1 o'clock when the party was just getting kind of going. But everybody ran inside, and the kids were fine. They were in their swimsuits, so we did get a downpour of rain. But I knit a Christina hat, and then I put ball-themed beads on it. So there was a baseball, a basketball, a tennis ball. I'm hoping that I'll put the video in here. I turned the hat. It turned out so cute, and it was such a great idea. I got the beads on Amazon. They had large holes. The football was a little hard to get on the stitch because it was a little taller, but I didn't really have too much trouble. And so I'll be posting that on my Instagram feed. I think it's a great idea to kind of put the bead on the stitch. That way the bead can't come off. It won't, there's no choking hazard. You're not stitching it on with yarn. You're actually putting it on the stitch using super floss. But I used a 1x1 rib pattern from my Christina hat. And so I just think it turned out really cute. And then the last thing that I was working on was the Striped Dream sweater. But also I had a car project. This is still slightly damp and it needs to go in the dryer to soften it up. But I am designing a hat called the Stevie Hat for my daughter's fiance, which will have just a cable right up the front of the hat, and that's it. And I saw one of these in a catalog, and it was $120 some, but it was in lighter weight yarn. So I was working on this hat design, and we were going somewhere, and I grabbed a skein of bulky yarn and threw it in the car, and this has been my car knitting for, I don't know, a couple of months. And I just decided that I was just gonna knit a cowl out of this bulky yarn for a Christmas gift for somebody. And I decided to put the cable up the front because that's what I'm doing with this Stevie hat. So that hat should be ready in probably the next 2 weeks if someone's interested in testing that. And then I'm gonna do a Pretty Boxes hat as well for Rhinebeck. I'm going to hand out cards for that hat to everyone who has knit the Pretty Boxes sweater that's going to Rhinebeck this year. So yeah, I got this one done. It's just a bulky hat. I just put a cable up the front of it. It's, super simple. I think it will be kind of nice once I get it dry. It's just a little bit, actually, it's really wet right here. So that I had oatmeal containers stuck in here, the round ones to keep it from getting a seam on it. And this must have been down because it didn't get any airflow. So that's why it's still damp on that one side. So yeah, I finished a bunch of stuff because I got this sweater going and then ran out of yarn. I was like, I got to bang out some of these other things. I knit on 2 other items. So I am finishing up my Croft Hoose mitts. These are the little mitts that have the little houses on them to match my Croft Hoose beanie that I've shown on the podcast. But the pattern called for just 2 repeats of the houses, and I decided to do a thumb gusset as opposed to a afterthought thumb. I don't like the way an afterthought thumb works. So when I'm doing my thumb gusset, my thumb got longer, which means I needed to do 2 more repeats to make it fit better. So I should have been done down here because the thumb hole would have been lower, but I had to, adjusted the pattern. And so they will match great. But I don't know that 1 repeat is enough. So on the hat, there are 3 houses, and I have 3 houses right now. I would have to block it. It is going to grow a little, but I think I need 1 more house so that was the decision that I was making the other night. They're coming along. It's a lot of color work in this little mitt, but they're turning out cute, and I do them in tandem. So I do have the other one to here, and now I'm ready to do the third house on this one. So yeah, that's coming along. I worked on that one night when I was watching the tour. And then the other thing that I worked on yesterday, so my husband and I decided to go to a movie. We have not been to a movie in a year. So we went and saw Fly Me to the Moon. He loves moon stuff, and he loved this. He thought it was funny. It's a comedy romance, but he loved the old cars. It takes place in '69, and so all the cars were old, and he could name every one, and he just thought it was the best. It's lighthearted. It's an interesting premise for a story. I didn't mind it, but I didn't have anything to knit. I did not have anything that was like easy in the round because I didn't have the yarn for this, which would have been perfect. And so I was like, oh, I know what I have that's gonna, be close to getting knit in the round is my Here Comes the Sun sweater, which I haven't showed since April because I haven't knit on it. And so this is my Here Comes the Sun. You see the flowers and then the sun. And I had 10 rows left before I would divide for the underarms and then knit in the round for the body. So I was like yesterday, I should edit the podcast, but if I sit and knit on this in the afternoon, I'll be so close to having this in the round, and then it could go to the movie for 2 hours. Well, I couldn't get 10 rows of the widest part of this sweater knit in the afternoon in a couple of hours. I had other things to do. So anyway, it didn't happen. But I loved working on this yesterday. It's so cute. So cute. It's got the flowers up here and then the flowers down here. It's all bunched up on the needle. But it is fingering weight. So it's slow going, and there are a lot of stitches on right now. And I'm just going into a little green and blue section, and then the whole body will be green until you get to the bottom, and then there's more color work at the bottom, more flowers. So it is quite, there's quite a bit going on. But it's so fun to work on, and I really do need to have this finished so I can wear it this summer, right? Especially, in August. I would really like to wear it when I go to teach in Lancaster in 2 weeks, but that isn't happening because as soon as the yarn comes for this, I gotta bang out 2 sweaters and get those knit up, especially since people don't really know what it looks like. So how am I gonna get testers until they know how the whole sweater looks? Anyway, what have I been watching? So I have been watching the Tour de France, which I absolutely love. I was behind because we were up north on vacation, and so I'm going to talk a bit about that, but I got caught up. I just sit and have it on. It's the best thing to knit to. You can just tune in, kind of when they're talking about some beautiful castle in France, or they're telling a story about one of the riders, and then you can kind of concentrate on your knitting when they're just riding over gravel or up the hills, the mountains, and I just love watching. It's 5 to 6 hours a day. They did have a rest day, so that helped me to catch up. Then I watched a documentary called Federer, The Last 12 Days. That was very good. It's maybe an hour and a half, and it is when he announced his retirement, and then they follow him into his final tournament that he's going to play in. It was really quite good. Then I watched a bunch of podcasts one night. I watched a podcast by a woman named A Knitter Obsessed, and the name of her podcast title was 11 Podcasts You Should Be Watching. And I always find it interesting when someone on YouTube does a video like this, or on Instagram, they say, hey, what are your favorite podcasts? Because my podcast never gets mentioned, and it's such a bummer, right? I don't have the biggest following, but what you will find is that she really likes slow, quiet, thoughtful podcasts. And so I am not that person, right? And I totally understand that I'm not for everyone. But they were a lot of sweet young things, as I like to call them. And so I went over and I wrote them down, and then I watched a part of each one of them. So this is what they were, in case you're not going to watch. Handmade by Florence, Two Pearls in a Pod, String Things by Mel, Well Loved Knits, Denim and Rain, and Knit Chic. Those are the ones I got too. I will put the list in the show notes down below, so you can just, on your YouTube underneath here, you can just click on the word more and it will drop down and you can find those. But I thought that was kind of fun to have some new podcasts. I subscribe to all of them, so they'll pop up in my feed. One of them has not posted something in the last couple months, but I watched her anyway. So yeah, they were all good. They're always good. You know, they're just different from what probably the most popular podcasts are. And then my friend sent me this wonderful Wall Street Journal article. It came out a while back, but I had someone in my knitting group who just got back from Iceland, and she talked about the wonderful trip they had. So here was in Iceland, the annual sheep sorting is open to tourists if they ask nicely. So if you have not watched Stephen West's video on going to Iceland and helping to sort the sheep, it's a great one. He went up there and helped to bring the sheep down from the mountains, and then they're in pens like this, and you have to straddle over their backs, grab their horns, and then sort them into a chute so that each farmer gets the sheep with the right tags. So you can be a part of that if you go to Iceland. So that's what this article was about. So I will be willing to share this with people. I put the article date. It is from Saturday and Sunday, March 30th and 31st in the Wall Street Journal, and it is the travel section. So you should be able to look it up online, except I think the Wall Street Journal requires a subscription, or maybe you can read, I think you can read the first few for free. So you could go over and look at that, but it was an interesting article. And Karen, who's in my knit group, but is unwilling to be on the podcast yet, had a wonderful time in Iceland and said it was just amazing. And then I want to share that I went over and looked at the new Tin Can Knits app more thoroughly. I was a part of their GoFundMe for that, and I got a chance to get that app as part of my GoFundMe. It is amazing. You can choose what size you want to knit, what pattern, and then it literally sorts out all the other sizes. So you just have your size. I would highly recommend, if you want to knit any of the Tin Can Knits patterns, especially the sweaters that are written for, 56 sizes, it is just wonderful. I have to knit a little baby sweater for this fall, and I was gonna, go over and do that. And it was just so clear, so well done. They're currently adding more patterns all the time, but it is just the best little app. I was just really pleased with how it came out. So I would highly recommend that. Their patterns are very well written, and it made it so easy to follow on my phone. The screen is big. You only get a certain chunk of each section at one time. I saw a really interesting post on Instagram from the Little Gettings Fiber Surreys, Little Gettings Farm Surreys, from LGF Surreys, which is a local, fairly local to me, farm that raises Surreys, does Surrey alpaca Anyway, and they posted this video of knitting as coding that they saw on TV, and it was so interesting. So I'm going to put that in here just so you can see it.
One of the provincial railway stations, it's abandoned now, but this of course was where some of the train spotting occurred.
So the watchers would be in a place like this?
Yes, absolutely.
I couldn't help but notice when I arrived you were knitting.
Well, in fact, the knitting was one of the ways that they could record the intelligence. Women sat on the train station outside their little cottages doing an ordinary action of knitting, but in fact they were coding into their pattern something which British intelligence would later understand. So various stitches would mean something. Knit one could be artillery carriages, purl one cavalry movements, and whether it was going towards the front or not.
So that would be a permanent record in the object, like the scarf, and that could be deciphered later.
Yes, it was a way of recording the information without the Germans suspecting.
I thought it was really neat, and it was, something, when you see something knitting related on TV, you tend to want to record it. So let's do the audiobooks. So I reread Infinite Country, and that's by Patricia Engel. We discussed it in book group. That is a story of a family that moves to US legally and then overstays their visa and doesn't go back, and so then they're considered illegal. The husband does eventually get deported. They send back their oldest daughter to live with grandma, and the mom stays here, so they're a split family for many years. It has a shift in narration about halfway through the book where you find out some information. It goes to first person, which is a little jarring, but otherwise, if you are interested in an immigration story, it is a good one. Then I read The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. That is a story of a woman who is working in a bookstore and makes friends with an elderly gentleman, and he passes away and leaves her the Book of Doors, and she does not realize that it is a magical book and comes into this world of all these books that have magical powers, and hers is the ability to open doors. So if she stands in front of a door, she can time travel and go to different places, and then it takes her down this path of people wanting all the books, and her life is in danger because of that. And it was kind of interesting. It was a fascinating premise, kind of bad people versus good people who want to use the books for good, and so yeah, I did enjoy it. I thought it was quite good. And then I just finished What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera, and that is a male romance. I loved this. It reminded me so much of high school kids who are so angsty during a first relationship. So if you have teenagers in your life, a young boy, a 17-year-old junior in high school, moves to New York City for the summer to do an internship at his mother's law firm, and his father is currently unemployed, and he is walking down the street, and he goes into the post office and meets this other guy, and he has never had a relationship before, and has more recently come out as gay. And he is funny, it's clever, it's very typically high school, what all the thoughts they have in their brain. I just really enjoyed it. So I would highly recommend that. It was a really nice listen, and had the spiciness of this book is pretty non-existent. It doesn't go into any sexual spiciness. Let's put it that way. So yeah, it was pretty clean, and I did really enjoy the story. Okay, I am teaching at Yarn Fest at the end of the month here. There are still class slots available. They usually have an incredible market. I am concerned about getting from Philadelphia to Lancaster on Wednesday the 31st. If anyone lives in that area, and knows how I can get from Philadelphia to Lancaster without spending an arm and a leg. I will have 2 suitcases and a backpack. So for me, taking the train is kind of an impossibility because it drops me like 1.5 miles from my hotel in Lancaster. And I don't really, and then I could catch an Uber, but it does take like 2.5 to 3 hours to get there. And I have not done a train, that Amtrak train before like that. So that makes me a little nervous. Not that I couldn't do it. So I'm thinking I'll just do an Uber. It's an hour. I'm going to have to suck up the cost, figure that out. Rent a car is kind of cost prohibitive. I don't need a car while I'm there. I do have a ride back on that Sunday. One of the people who is working for Yarn Fest will be flying out on Sunday, and so she has offered me a ride back with her, but no one that I have found is coming in on Wednesday. So I need to figure that out. If you know of anybody who lives in the area and can say, hey, there's a direct route from the Philadelphia airport to Lancaster, it's like an hour away, let me know, because I don't know how else to do it. And I can take the bus apparently, but that seems really slow too. Plus I've got these 2 suitcases because I'm taking 6 classes worth of stuff with me. I just guess I didn't really realize how far away Lancaster was. I should have looked into that more carefully. There are teachers coming in. I've reached out to each of them, and nobody's coming in on the same day as me. They're all either coming in on Tuesday or Monday. It's just not working out at all. So I'm trying to figure that out. We did go up north for the 4th of July. It was lovely. I cannot tell you how much I love northern Minnesota. The bugs were terrible. The mosquitoes were terrible. It's very wet up there, and it's forest. If you were in the sun, you were fine. So if we were on our dock on the lake, we had a little dock that comes kind of with our cabin, little square dock. I have some video I'm going to put in at the end. But otherwise, the mosquitoes were really bad. So I stayed inside. I'm not an outdoorsy portage kind of gal. Not anymore anyway. I used to portage with my husband, but he portaged all 3 days, and I did go to town twice. We did have friends up there. It was really ironic. I'm sitting out on Wednesday night with these friends. We're going to dinner. We're planning our next day, and the guys are going to portage together, and then they have a dog, and so we're trying to figure that out. And we're sitting outside on the beach waiting to go into the Angry Trout Cafe. So if you've been to the Grand Marais area on Lake Superior, you know what the Angry Trout restaurant is. It's well known. And we look down, and there's Brianne Moody, who is a knitwear designer who we met at Sweater Camp, who sat at our table and did a little talk at Sweater Camp. And Mary goes, I think that's Brianne. And she lives up there, so that, would make sense that we might see her. But what are the chances on a random Wednesday night, the night before the 4th, that we would run into her? So we went over and said hello, and she goes, oh, I recognize you. And yeah, so that was kind of fun. She was knitting at her table while she was eating, so that was kind of neat. I did spend my entire time in the car every single day working on this, re-knitting this and figuring out the new numbers and writing down. I'm doing it for 12 sizes, so it was a lot of work, and that's all I did literally. I did go to town and shop a little bit. There's a new yarn store that opened a little while ago. It's called the Dappled Fern. It was lovely. And then I interviewed Jamie Rex for my next podcast. So she is the owner of North Road Knits, and she knits bulky hats for sale and writes bulky and chunky knitting hat patterns and cowls. And it was lovely to meet her. She lives just north of Grand Marais, and I followed her on Instagram for a long time, and we have corresponded a little bit. And so she came up to the Bearskin Lodge, which is where we stay on the Gunflint Trail, which is about 20 miles north of Grand Marais, up the trail toward Canada. So we are getting close to Canada. There are 2 restaurants up on the trail, so we can go out to eat and don't have to drive all the way back into town, which we love. So we ate at the Poplar House, and then we ate at the Trail Center. And so that is lovely because they're both about 5 to 10 minutes from the Gunflint, on the Gunflint from the Bearskin Lodge, which is where we stay. We stayed in like a townhome unit. There are 4 townhome units attached to the lodge. And it just changes at about Duluth or even south. It just changes as you're headed up north. It becomes so forested and so beautiful. And you're driving along Lake Superior the whole way. It's so pretty. And it's just quiet. I mean, honestly, it's just quiet. But we saw moose, and that was so exciting. We had turned in on Wednesday night to go down the gravel road to the Gunflint, off the Gunflint, and this moose just came right across the road in front of us. We were maybe going 10 or 15 miles an hour. It was not a big bull moose with a big rack. It was maybe a yearling, or, I mean, it's big, still big like a horse, but not gigantic like a male bull moose. But it just trotted right across the road in front of us, and, you know, not enough time to get out your phone or try to take a picture. Just moved right across the road and went right into the forest again. So that was really, really fun. I just love spending that time up there. We both agreed it just changes your whole demeanor. Like, you just take a deep breath and it's quiet and there's not a television and you're just, you know, kind of there. And yeah, it was just lovely. So highly recommend a trip to Grand Marais, which is north of Duluth, which is on Lake Superior. It's a beautiful part of the country. Yeah, it was just really, I felt so blessed to be able to go on a vacation trip like that. We didn't go for the whole week. We went up on Wednesday and came back on Sunday, although we will not do that again because it took us 7 hours to get home. And it should not take that long. Traffic was terrible coming home, and we should have thought of that. We know better. On Memorial Day, we come back the day before or the day after, and we got up early. We left at 8, thinking, you know, and there were 2, you know, single lane highway slowdowns where you had to wait and wait. We just sat on the interstate, and it was just the worst coming home. I was knitting most of the way, and then I took a nap. I was like, I'm going to sleep for an hour. I let my husband drive, so that worked out okay. Okay, I have a little recipe that I'm going to share. I haven't shared a recipe in a long time, but I went to this 1-year-old's birthday party yesterday. I just took a little bit of this pasta salad that was there, didn't think much of it. It was delicious. So I said to my sister-in-law, this is so good, I need the recipe. And they laughed because her mother, Ashley's the mom of the little 1-year-old boy, she made this salad, and then her mom showed up with the exact same salad, and it makes a ton. So they had like a double batch. So they said, we will send some home with you. I just found it really interesting because it had pasta and a cabbage in it, and a cucumber and a green pepper, and then an onion, and then you just make the dressing. It was so fresh and crisp, but I never would have put a pasta and a cabbage, shredded cabbage, in the same bowl. It was like coleslaw-y. It tasted like coleslaw, but it had this pasta in it with these cucumbers. Oh, it was so good. So I will post the recipe in my Ravelry group in the old recipes thread, but I'm also going to put it up here on the screen, and you can take a picture if you choose to. Work for some of you. You can take a picture of it. So she said it makes so much that she would probably have the recipe, but they both made the full recipe. So it's 2 boxes of ring macaroni, 2 cups of cabbage, a cucumber, a green pepper, and onion optional. And then the dressing is just sugar, Miracle Whip, and vinegar. So it really was good. I think it would be just as good with a coleslaw dressing, pre-made coleslaw dressing poured over it, but I just really liked it. So I thought, okay, I typed it up when I got home because I took a picture of her recipe and put it in my recipe file on my computer, and so that will be something that I'll be making this week for us. Although my husband doesn't like green pepper, and I love it. Let's do the giveaways. I have the giveaway from last week, which is the skein of Dream and Color yarn, and then the 2 little mouse figurines that are all wrapped up and packaged and ready to go already. And that is going out to the winner, GA Teacher Friend. That's Nadine Pierce. So congratulations, Nadine. I think that is Georgia Teacher Friend. And you are the winner for commenting on episode 151. And the new prize that I'm giving away next week is a glorious one. I mean, this is really neat. I have this great print, and it is a sheep, and it says Scholar Sheep on it, and it says how to knit a book. It's really neat. It's on cardstock, and I've had it for a while. I had it in a picture frame. I have too many of these. Too many picture frames in my house. I took it out. I didn't know what to do with it. I sat it there, and then I thought, oh, I could just give it away on the podcast. So one of you can win that. All you have to do is comment down below. You don't have to use a word or anything, because really, honestly, so few people from Patreon are watching the podcast and commenting that I think it'll just be fine. I'll just do a random number generator. And then lastly, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I haven't talked about this yet. So this sweater was sent to me this week by Suzanne Selby, who is already on the podcast. And she had reached out to me a while ago and said that a friend of hers had won this sweater in a drawing. And I believe that the sweater was already pre-worn and she won it. And it was too bright and too colorful for either she or Suzanne, and they thought of me. And I was tickled, because it came in the mail and it is so cute. I will absolutely wear this. They are wrapped stitches. Yeah, and then it has this interesting collar with a wrapped stitch on it. Yeah, it's really neat. I'm just really tickled with it. I did take a picture of it, and I used the Google photo search to try to find the pattern, and the Google photo search keeps reading it as a crochet. And everything that comes up is something that looks like this, but it's crocheted. And this is definitely knitted, because these rows in between are all knit, and this is a wrap stitch. So it is not crocheted at all, but isn't it cute? It's so cute. Yeah, so I'm so thankful that they thought of me, because as soon as it gets warm enough this winter, this will just brighten up my day. I need orange jeans, don't you think, to wear with that? I don't have orange jeans, but I should have them. I have orange overalls, but anyway, I thought it was just perfect, and it just came in the mail, and so I wanted to kind of share that with all of you. I think that's all I have for this week. I've got tons of tour to watch the rest of the day today, and I have to edit. I have to edit my dad's podcast and then edit this one to get it up for you all tomorrow. I will see you all in 2 weeks. I hope I see some of you at Knit Night on the 27th. And I hope I can see some of you in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the end of the month, because my classes are very small. They had very low enrollment. I think it's the weekend. It's summer. I don't think that a lot of people are thinking about going to knitting events. So it's just a bummer, because I'm still going and I'm still getting paid, but my classes are all very low enrollment. And I know one of the other teachers isn't coming because she comes from California, and her classes had low enrollment too. And she said, I can't afford to fly and take the whole time to get all the way to Pennsylvania. And I said, well, I'm still going. But all right, talk to you all soon. Bye.